Hey, how's it going? We are back with another Hooptober horror movie marathon. Well, that's a mouthful. And we left off with a few movies last time that just weren't a big note for me. They were kind of a low note, really. And it wasn't very fun. They weren't very entertaining. So, unfortunately, and this does this every year. When you do this many movies packed into a short amount of time, you're going to have a lot of movies you don't care for. You're going to have movies that are good and bad, and you go from a good note to a bad note, and there's highs and lows, and usually it's not. I don't think it's quite this pronounced, but it depends on how you attack your list. Like in this particular way, what I've been doing the last 3 years maybe is going from the oldest to the newest. So I've ran into problems in the past where you get some tonal changes where you go from black and white to color and something from the 30s to something from the 80s, and it doesn't work real well for me. I kind of like going through time so that everything stays the same. And in theory, the theory anyway, is that as you get to the newer movies, you're going to get into the gorier movies. You're going to get into, I don't want to say better necessarily for stories, but you're going to get into more entertaining somewhat, theoretically. And unfortunately, that hasn't happened for me. I hit a bad run of movies that were they're not bad. They were just not interesting to me. They weren't fun for this marathon, and they kind of got a little tedious to get through. Which, again, you run into this when you do this many movies in a short amount of time. You're going to, unless you're having bangers all the time, you don't know what you're going to get, and you don't know how they're going to go. So, unfortunately, I had a big skid of movies that were just bad. And this first movie is Hagazussa, and this one's from Austria or Germany, somewhere in there. This was 2017. This was another skidder, man. This one got compared to The Witch from, I don't know, what was that, 2016, 18, whatever it was, just a few years ago. And that movie, I did not like The Witch the first time I watched it. In fact, I hated it. And I had just a nasty review for it because I didn't care for it. It was way too slow. I was about to fall asleep through the whole thing. But I had bought it because everybody said it was so great. I had actually bought it on Blu-ray. And I hung on to it. I was like, I really don't like this movie, but I'll give it another shot. So I actually watched that one like the next year or later that year, whichever it was, on my last night of the marathon. That was my Halloween night movie. And I actually really loved it. I think I've watched it one more time since. And I actually really love The Witch. It took a while to grow on me. It's a very slow burn throughout, but it's a very excellent movie. And this Hagazussa gets compared to that. I can see why, but I don't agree with it. It is definitely a period movie. It is definitely a slow-paced movie. It's got the same sort of style and the same elements to it. But this movie here was way slow. It had no good payoff. It wasn't so much boring. It was kind of interesting throughout. Like they had interesting imagery and the camera work was good, but it didn't do it for me. I got through it and it's all in whatever language it's in, which I don't mind subtitles. I have no problem with that. But this thing just didn't deliver. And then I had to read up some things about it. I mean, it's a pretty straightforward film, but one thing it does is it apparently has things in different order than they actually occur. So you get to something in the future and then you go to the past and you're back in the future and then you're in the present. And that doesn't work for me necessarily. It depends on the movie. Like Pulp Fiction, loved it. I love that change in time, but you kind of have to watch the movie a couple times to get it. This movie was so straightforward that when I watched it, that I was like, I read it back and I'm like, okay, that all makes sense. And that's it. I mean, the payoff just wasn't there. The ending was, I don't know, it was just kind of ended and you're like, okay, well, that was cool, I guess. So I don't know. Hagazussa, I gave 3 out of 5 stars. I did not really care for this one all that much. It's a well-made movie. That's why it got such a high rating, but I just didn't like it. It was another one on my skid. Now, the next movie I watched is only 28 minutes long, and if I'd have known this, I wouldn't have included it on my list, but I've watched a bunch of extra stuff too, so it doesn't matter. This was my movie for primarily black cast or black director or whatever. And this movie actually has one black guy in it, but he is such a central character to the entire story. I don't mind that there's other people that are not, you know. I think it's very fitting. The story this thing tells, in that 28 minutes, this thing wastes no time. And I gave this one 3.5 out of 5 stars. It's kind of a little bit of a budget film. This could have worked as a single location film also. I mean, this works with a few different criteria for this list. But this thing was very well done for the amount of runtime it's got. I mean, this is short. This is a very short film. And you can, I mean, I blew through it on lunch one day. I was like, all right, I'm watch this thing. It's only 30 minutes long. So I sat down and blew through it. The movie, have you ever watched 4 or 5 movie trailers and you feel like you've seen a movie? You know, you watch a bunch of trailers and you just feel like you've watched something, even though you've only watched, I don't know, 15, 20, 30 minutes of something. That's how this movie feels. It's only 28 minutes long, but I feel like I watched a full-length movie and got my money's worth, if you want to call it that. This was a very nice surprise. Now, there's probably some things people may or may not like about it. I don't know. I don't care. There's certain things in this movie that just don't bother me. I don't care. I don't want to give anything away because it's all central to the plot and all. But it was good. I liked this. I liked this a lot. Basically, this guy tries to commit suicide. That's like the first 5 seconds of the show. He gets into a hospital, like the mental ward on the hospital, because he's attempted suicide and everything. And they're going to put him in for a, I don't know, 24-hour, 48-hour hold just to make sure he's okay. But the problem is the hospital is haunted by this demon. And this demon takes an interest in him. And that's where everything goes. Now, the demon looked awesome. If you've ever played Left 4 Dead, I don't know if you remember if it's the first one or the second one or both of them, but they have that screaming witch with the big hand, the big claws and everything. She comes screaming out after you. She looks just like the demon in here. And I thought that was awesome. I'm like, yeah, I know what that is. That sucked to fight. But this movie was good. I like this a lot. This was on Shudder. And I'm glad I picked this. This one delivered. Unfortunately, this dude was only in like 1 or 2 movies total. I'd like to see him in more. I thought he was a really good actor. I thought he did a really good job in the whole thing. And this as a full-length movie would be cool. The ending was kind of It could have ended a lot better. Like it seemed like it took the easy way out instead of... But I don't know. It ended my skid of bad movies. So I was happy with it. I think I said it, but I gave this one 3.5 out of 5 stars. And this was a 2018 movie. The next one on the list is Monstrum, and this is South Korean, I believe. This movie was awesome, man. I loved this. I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars. If you can't tell, I love this thing. So when this movie starts off, it's about some people under a regime or whatever, and it kind of reminded me of a Shaw Brothers film. Regime is not the right word. Whatever the older term, you know, from the 1400s, whatever that is for some kind of Asian royalty, whatever. I'm bad with words. But at any rate, when this started off, this thing reminded me of a Shaw Brothers film. I thought, man, it'd be awesome to have some of the combat you get from the Shaw Brothers movie with the swords and the glaives and everything. And next thing you know, they've got fighting going on in here. I mean, they're all in their period costumes, or, you know, everything looks great. They're in little villages, mud huts and stuff like that. This movie has a great atmosphere. And the whole premise is that there's like the plague running around their area at some point. And the one general, as far as I could tell, the one military leader, general, whatever he was, he leaves the army. And then a few years later, there's this monster thing that they have to go find, and they come to get him, take him back to the emperor, I think it was. I'm not sure what the leader was called, but so they go back into him and send him out. But then there's some political intrigue because there's somebody else vying for the throne, and there's a lot of things in motion on here. And you're thinking, okay, the monster isn't real, but the monster is real. And this political intrigue is them acting like the monster's real when it's really not, but it really is. I mean, you know, And this thing, I mean, it might get a little cheesy here and there, but oh my God, this movie delivers. And I don't know, now I'm probably watching the cream of the crop, but I don't know that I've ever watched a South Korean movie that was bad. They make some fantastic movies, and this was no exception. This was great. Good animation on the monster and everything. Sometimes the CGI can get a little cheeseball, but this was well made, very well made. I highly recommend this movie. This was also on Shudder, and of course, I said I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars. This was another 2018 movie. The next movie was also on Shudder, and that's Nightmare Cinema. I gave this one 3.5 out of 5. I liked this movie. I didn't love it, but I liked it. A lot of people I know some of the reviews I read didn't seem too happy about it, but I really liked it, to be honest with you. There's 4 or 5 different stories, and they're all by different directors. And some of the directors you'll recognize, I don't remember them off the top of my head, but some of the directors you'll recognize. But I enjoyed the way all the directors had different stories. And in fact, one of the things that I really liked about Human Centipede 2 was that it was in black and white. I loved the appeal of that with the visuals and everything. There's one of the tales in here is filmed in black and white, and I think that worked really well. And now I'm really wanting some good, solid horror movies that are in black and white. I think it kind of adds to the appeal, and especially when you have a really gritty, dirty, and grimy, nasty film or idea that you're trying to convey. I think that works fantastic in black and white, and that worked excellent in Human Centipede 2, and it worked really well in this little short, whatever you want to call it, the one piece. I liked all the stories in this. A lot of times there's usually one really weak story, but I really liked it. For an anthology, this one was good. I liked it. I really don't understand why some people knock it down a little bit, because I thought it was pretty excellent myself. But anyway, I gave that one 3.5 out of 5 stars. That was also on Shudder. And the last one I'm going to talk about today is called Relic. This is from this year. This is one of the entries I needed from 2020. And I thought, I heard, some things about this movie, and I thought, yeah, I'll check it out. Unfortunately, this movie was good, but I didn't care for it all that much. I gave this one 3 out of 5 stars, which again is my midline. I don't know, it's acceptable. Probably not using the right word for that. I mean, it's well made. It was decently acted. I believe this was from Australia, so it ticks a box for other country, Australia or New Zealand, one of the two. And it was good. It was a little slow, and I don't mean slow as in bad. It had good pacing. For a slower movie, it was paced well. Like, there's no boring parts where you're going to fall asleep. It was paced as it needed to be, but I don't think it really delivered well on the ending. It delivered the ending they were after, I'm sure, because I've read up on what it's supposed to mean and everything, and I agree with what they did. I don't have a problem with it. I just didn't care for the overall idea, if that makes sense. Like, the movie was made well, it was paced well, it was acted well, it was shot well, lit well, everything looked good. I just didn't have that connection with it. Like, it just didn't quite get there for me. So this one was a bit of a miss. Kind of a disappointment, but kind of not. Amazon Prime had this thing for like 99-cent rental, and I was like, yeah, I'm on that, because I knew I needed it, so I rented it. And that's the last 5 I've watched. I do have It Chapter 2, which I'm going to save for this weekend because it's like almost 3 hours. And then I have The Invisible Man from 2020. And that one is almost 2 hours, so I'm saving that for the weekend. I also have Cube 2 Hypercube, which just came up on Google Play for like $4, so I snagged it. I love that movie anyway. I've already seen it, so that's going to be in the next video. And then there's one called The Witch That Came from the Sea, which has this amazing video cover on it, but I've heard it's kind of crappy, but the story on it sounds really cool, so we'll see. It's from the 70s, so kind of iffy. Some are good, some are bad. It depends. But at any rate, that is all I've got for this round of movies. I've got probably one more video left in this series. I might, unless this next video goes long, I might do a recap on what I thought was the best and what I thought was the worst, but we'll see how everything goes. And that's really all I have for this one. It's getting hot in here. I'm starting to sweat. Take care.